Hello AP US History students. This video is designed to review and go over and read an example of an essay from the Imperialism DBQ documents that we went over in class. So I've asked you guys to color code it as an assignment. I'm just looking at my hard copy here. And I want to go over it. So this essay, as I previously said, is a 4 out of 7. So let's read it together and see where it earns the points and see where it doesn't earn the points. The first section, or the first point that you're really going to award for a student, would be obviously the thesis point. And the thesis should and is required to be according to the rubric. You can type in that bit.ly link you see there on the screen. The rubric should be either in one place, either in the introduction or the conclusion. And for my class, I always won't give you the point if it's in the conclusion. I want it in the introduction. And the key part is you have to make sure that you answer all parts of the prompt. This thesis that you see highlighted in yellow is extremely long, and this student could have been more succinct, but do they answer all parts of the prompt? The answer is yes. They identify the 2 points of the anti-expansionists and the pro-expansionists, and they indicate what they view as what is national identity. They say for those that favored expansionism, increased economic wealth and influence, a desire to civilize savage populations, and Christianize them, and spoke of the moral duty of the United States. So they give 4 influences for why you had pro-expansionists. And then they say, contrastingly, there were those that were against overseas expansion, and they argued the United States should focus on domesticism or domestic issues. Government can't interfere without the consent of the people, and the negative effects of involvement in war were not worth expansion. So there you have 3 indications of what national identity means at the time. So they do earn the point there. The rest of the essay is mainly going to be significantly spent in the green highlighter. So you have the first topic sentence. There are many in the United States who desired overseas expansion and saw it as a duty of the United States to the world. So that is kind of just a clear topic sentence. And then they dive directly into the documents. In document 1, African-American editor E.E. Cooper argues that the War of Spain would, quote, cement races into a more compact brotherhood through perfect unity in purpose and patriotic affinity. Here, in my experience as an AP reader, is where the student goes wrong. They spend, in this essay, too much time quoting the documents. And whenever I see a document being quoted in an essay, if it's really 5 words or more, they're not really telling me anything. They're not using the quote to illustrate a point. They're not analyzing it. So I just skip it whenever I see a quote, because I know these documents, really. So I would skip. He argues that war with Spain. He is proposing that the Spanish-American War was a great thing for the United States because blacks would be able to join whites in the fight for democracy. That is a good summary of the document, of document 1, thereby showing white Americans that black sense of duty to the United States. Again, good summary. Here is, and so the summary of the document, and they're clearly using it to support the pro-expansionists. So that's why they get the check, or the Y for yes, of does the document support their argument. Then they do get the point for point of view. As an African-American himself, he hoped that this cooperation among blacks and whites would lower racial prejudice in the United States. Good. That's a good use of point of view. So they get both check marks there. And you can see on the chart I indicated what part of HIP they got, POV. President McKinley would lower racial prejudice in the President McKinley claims in document 3 that several reasons deem it necessary for the United States overseas expansion, and explaining why, blah, blah, blah. Again, this student spends quite a long time summarizing the document, but he does clearly connect it back to pro-expansionists. So again, they're going to earn that yes check for the use of the document. Skip down to middle of this really long paragraph. McKinley claims that they are, quote, unfit for self-government, thus exemplifying the wide belief in the late 19th and early 20th century of the white man's burden. So this is actually their attempt at outside specific factual information. You can link your outside evidence to a document. However, if you look back on the rubric, the requirement for evidence beyond the documents or outside evidence provides an example or additional pieces of evidence to qualify or support the argument. So they do that. However, look at the note. The example must be different from the evidence used in the other points, and it must require more than a passing reference or phrase, but an explanation. So here, this student just gives the passing reference. They just mention the white man's burden. They don't expand upon it. They don't explain what that is, and that it was a poem by Kipling, that it really personifies all that stuff. They just mention it. So it's not fully, if they're not fully explaining it, so they're not going to get that point. But they do try. The next section, he speaks of the American ideology and manifest destiny, that it is by God's grace to do the very best we could by them. That is, McKinley emphasized, according to the principle of manifest destiny, it was America's God-given right to expand beyond its borders. Again, that's a good attempt at contextualization. And yes, they do state what it is, and they do explain what manifest destiny is, but it's not the broader historical events, and it's not, they need to connect it back to the prompt, back to the question. There's no explanation for that. They just kind of plop it in there. You need to fully explain it. So unfortunately, we see attempts at both outside specific information and contextualization, but both are too vague to earn the points. In document 5, Teddy Roosevelt explains, again, lots of quoting, but it is a good summary. They fought Spain to liberate the natives from Spain's territory. It would be doing a disservice to the Filipinos who are not educated or fit enough to govern themselves. Again, this is really good use of the document and connecting it back to the pro-expansionists. Then they do what's kind of unique, and they talk about the intended audience for both 3 and 5. Generally, if you just combine multiple documents and you say both documents 3, 7, and 8 have the same point of view of a pro-expansionist, you're not going to get the point. You only get it if you individually discuss the point of view or the intended audience. And here, this student does it really well. McKinley's audience is a church delegation, hence the fact that he emphasized the idea that God has granted America this duty of moral obligation. Roosevelt's hidden intentions included economic gains for the Philippines, which business owners and local leaders fostered this prosperity. So they individually explain the intended audience for both 3 and 5. So they get both the I under in the box for 3 and document 5. They do both of them very, very well. The next paragraph is a large paragraph about disapproval for overseas expansion. They mention document 2. Now, document 2 is just a summary of what's in the document. They try to argue that it is purpose in saying that he claims that this was the same policy that was implemented on Spain by our colonies, but it is, if you go back and if you read the document 2, that is just a summary. That's not using the document and explaining why it's a disapproval, why it's anti-expansionist. Document 4 was Jane Addams. Again, way too much quoting. That the so you got to be careful that if you spend too much time quoting, you're not actually telling the reader anything. But they do get the point of view for talking about her point of view as being a social reformer. She argues the humanitarianist perspective only leads to heightened tensions at home, which is not worthy of cost to pay. That is a very good use of point of view, the humanitarian perspective, because she's a social reformer. William Jennings Bryan, also, that is a strong strong use and summary of the document, but they do not extend to HIP. And the same for 7. They do use that very, very well. That was the image of the eagle. They say the image document 7 argues that the United States has been too far. Puerto Rico and the Philippines were required through the Spanish-American War, while Panama was liberated from Colombian rule on the pretense the citizens of Panama were allowed to build the Panama Canal. So that is actually historical context as well. So they not only get POV, they also get historical context. At the end, in conclusion, there's just summarizing their argument. There's another reference back to Manifest Destiny, but again, it's only a mentioning, not an explanation. So looking at the rubric, yes, they do get the thesis point, and yes, they do use 6 out of 7. They talked about all 7, but 2 was just a summary, and there was no connection back to the argument. They do extend to HIP for at least 4 documents, and they are accurate. Although that student also got, for document 7, they got historical context and point of view, that only counts as 1 point, or 1 check, because it's 4 documents, not 4 times. Contextualization and outside specific evidence, both references are too vague. Synthesis, there's no attempt at synthesis. Now, argument development is kind of the last point that you would give to a student. This one, and the quote is up here, develops and supports a cohesive argument that recognizes and account for historical complexity by explicitly illustrating relationships. They do that very well with documents 3 and 5 by talking about contradiction, corroboration, documents 3 and 5, or qualification. So this one, you're looking at consistency. Do they maintain their argument throughout? Do they argue something different by the end of the essay? And do they group the documents and corroborate evidence to support a strong, cohesive argument? And the answer is that they do. This essay does discuss the documents and maintain an argument throughout, which is why they get that point. So we've got 4 points, 1 for the thesis, 1 for the argument, 1 for the use of 6 documents, and 1 for HIP. All right, guys, I hope that clarifies this example essay for you, and I hope you have a good day.